All right, gang, if you are watching or listening, I am joined by a very cool filmmaker. He put together a film that is very attuned to the times of our society called Alone Together. You can watch it right now on Tubi, and it is a really thrilling psychological fuck with you type of horror film, but he is director Will Kresch. How you doing today, man?
How's it going, guys? Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
This film was I was getting numerous different kind of vibes. I was getting like the Shining vibes as they're psychologically losing their shit. Your color palette when they start to lose their shit gave me some Suspiria vibes. Like
I'll take it.
this film was really like tripping me out for multiple reasons, but it was very much carried by your lead actress and actor. And I got to ask right off the get go, is your antagonist like your brother?
Yeah, it's my little brother, Maddie,
Yeah, he looks just like you.
which is weird. Yeah, I stay on the other side of the camera though. He's my little evil muse. We've been kind of doing this since he popped out of the old womb there, and it's been interesting ever since. I'll tell you that.
What so I can kind of put two together, but I want to hear from you. Like, where did this come from? Like, where were you, writing? Where were you at when you came up with the plot for this film?
Yeah, I mean, it was so I'm from Brooklyn. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and it was like that peak of that first pandemic wave when we were holed up in the apartments. The apartment you see on film is mine, and it was just like it was so claustrophobic, so freaky. People were literally being carried out of our building. It was a small co-op building. People getting carried out on stretchers in the middle of the night, sirens everywhere. We just go up on the rooftop and just you could just see the glowing lights just going up and down the streets all night long. My grandmother passed away during that time. She
Oh
didn't
man.
get COVID, but we couldn't go to Florida to, do the proper mourning. So that was just like, it was like a theft of the grieving for the whole family. And it was just like, it felt so unfair. And like, I don't know, there was so much like rage. I don't know why my instinct was rage. But that's where it was kind of like boiling up. And as a freelancer, no one, I wasn't working, no one was working. We truly didn't know when we were going to come out, if we were going to come out, or how we were going to come out of the other side of that thing. So I just started putting pen to paper, and my fraternity brother, actually Alex Vernenbach, who is the co-writer of this movie, he hit me up with the concept, just kind of out of the blue. He's like, "What about a ghost story? Two people locked away for some reason, and rather than the ghost just tormenting them, it ends up being the liberation factor for the female protagonist. Kind of turn it inside out." And I thought it was novel enough to kind of it definitely stuck with me, and I was trying to figure out exactly how that would work. And the pandemic just kind of was just hugging our imaginations at that point, and it just kind of seeped in everywhere. And I thought that whole vibe, when we were in it, you just didn't quite know how it was going to come out. So we tried to just harness all those like brutally shitty feelings that we were all going through, the fear, the claustrophobia, the paranoia. But then also it really just became an allegory for a relationship. And, kind of like how, what's it called? Midsommar is like the greatest breakup movie ever. This
Mhm.
is kind of like I don't know, maybe domestic abuse version of that. It's not, or psychological abuse version or something like that. But the idea of, you give so much to someone and you can't truly know exactly who they are for a long time. And when Nassdja goes up to this cabin, it's such an away game for her that she just really she just doesn't have any grass to touch there. It's so foreign to her, and it is the place where all of Luke's trauma began. And it's kind of like, the closer he gets to it, the more radioactive he gets. And the idea of everyone wanted to escape the pandemic. Everyone was going away to these, people's parents had houses and X, Y, and Z, and we were stuck in Brooklyn, which it was turned out just fine and everything. But at that time, that the desire to just like, all right, let's go somewhere else and we'll hide out. And then what if you're bringing the horror with you? What if it's in you and you can't escape it? And then once you are isolated with it, then it just triggers the fight or flight, where it's either it's going to consume you or you have to fight your way out. And when you realize that, that's where I think the drama comes, when Nassdja realizes, like, oh, I can't just leave. I can't talk my way out of this. I can't fix this. I'm in it now, and it's only going to go one of two ways. So
Yeah, I think that you guys nailed it. I sympathize with your grandma. My wife's grandma was the same kind of
sorry.
deal, where she passed away, and she had a bunch of other health issues, and they labeled it as COVID. And that really upset my mother-in-law, because she's
Yeah.
like, she didn't fucking die of COVID. Like, she died because of this. Why is this on her death certificate? And it was just the mass hysteria of, it was almost like an assembly line of how they were turning out the bodies of, oh, it's COVID, 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 COVID.
Yeah.
Right. And you see that when she gets the phone call from her parents and her dad is sick, and all she really wants to do is be there for her parents, and she knows she can't. And Luke is, it's interesting, how you guys, formed their relationship, because he's definitely abusive, but he's also like this enabler,
Mhm.
where he is got her, ensnared within his, like you're saying, like that emotional abuse. Um, hey, I know, like, I feel bad because your races got canceled. Here's these new running shoes I got for you. Don't you still love me? These run, and it was really heavy, man. And the first, you know 2 acts of the film is really like, when I was saying the shining thing, which it's cool to hear you talk about how she's so out of her element up there in the woods, um, where she's losing her shit because of that, on top of the emotional, stuff. Like, where did you find her? Because she really did nail that through, translation through the screen to get that coming across.
Oh man, it's so cool to hear you say that, especially the Shining references, because of course it just looms large in any horror movie and escape movie and things like that. We didn't It wasn't really derivative on purpose. Everything was kind of there, and then that just kind of started like emerging in the edit, and we're like, well, all right, that's definitely all there. So it's cool that it's not a mirror, but maybe a reflection.
Mhm.
um, Not 100%, but and so Deanna S. Wright she's our wicked Shelley Duvall. She is a powerhouse. Like I there Watching her on screen, which I'm so proud of her for giving us those performances, because she just tore herself open to do that. And it is like painful. And I got to tell you, being physically in the space with her when she was doing those,
Mm.
it was jarring. It was scary. Like it was like as a director, first time director, like I don't have a ton of experience with this level of like that kind of emotion coming out of someone, and the guilt I felt to put her through that every damn day. The crazy thing is that shoot was so physically and emotionally taxing for everybody. It was such a low budget affair that we were all going a little bit crazy, and we were all so tired and whacked out. And then she is going 900 miles past the finish line with these performances. And thank God she was nailing them in like one or two takes, because it would mess everyone up like for the next couple hours. Like, all right, everyone just take a break and smoke a bouquet of cigarettes, because like it was so freaking intense. We My brother and her went to a solo rep down in Florida for the master's program there, and they did some Shakespeare together, and I had seen them once or twice on stage, and I was like, man, there's something there for sure, especially between those two. And when I was putting the movie together, it was always going to be my brother, and I was like, Maddie, can we get to her?
Mm.
And she dove in with just, I mean, she skydived in. It was crazy to her level of commitment the amount of physical and emotional taxing stuff that because she's like super method, where all this stuff is just coming from, either past lives or memories or something like that. And for her to put that out there so in such a real way, she just like opened up the dump valves, and like I'm in awe of her. I'll be sitting next to her like in the theater watching a screening, and I'll be like, geez, like she's a wild one. And I told her, even in the very beginning, no matter how good or bad or whatever this movie becomes, you getting up there on that big screen and doing what you do, like that's going to be a gift to yourself and everyone else. And I'm just so excited to see what she does next with a more competent director, and something that she can like, really pop. So that's kind of my like favorite part of this process right now.
Yeah, New York is a trippy experience from coming from California. My cousin, godson, and her husband, they live in Massachusetts, and so when we go visit, we've kind of made our way around New England. And one of my best friends has since moved over by Rochester, New York. And the West Coasters, I feel like when we think in New York, it's all Brooklyn, Manhattan, big cityscape. And driving through New York this last summer, the actual state, it's kind of a trip to see how remote some of the state truly is. It is like, you're going through Vermont and it's all these hills and everything, and then you get in New York and it's like, well, where the hell are all the cities at? Because it's still very wooden, very foresty.
Mhm.
So where did you guys go? Did you just guys find a spot, or
Yeah,
where was that cabin at?
yeah. So we shot up in Vermont. Actually, you mentioned it,
Oh, right.
which I mean, dead on. And it was awesome because it was just this time of year, maybe like it was like around that like leaf peeper time, which I wasn't aware of was like a thing, but like it was just gorgeous, like the foliage, the colors and everything. So that, we tried to get as much of that on camera as we could. And my buddy, Christian Fiorina, who he's like my favorite human being. His dad has a cabin up in Vermont, and his father came on as one of the like first producers for the movie, to executive produce and stuff. And we were like, oh, we can shoot this at his cabin. And we go up and see the cabin, and it's just like really slick, gorgeous A-frame. And we're like, that's really nice. We can't use that. And like, just shooting in an A-frame with just a giant triangle of glass where everything is in a reflection. We're like, all right, we can't do this.
Yeah.
So we were I was just driving around up in the backwoods there, and I took a wrong turn, and we dead ended, and it's this cabin that we found. And I'm like, holy shit, like this is it, right? This has to be it. Get out of the car. I'm like peeping in. It looked like it was kind of like it hadn't been used in a while. No one knew whose it was. We had to talk to like the town's the realtor records to try and track down who the hell owned it. Turned out that woman had passed away, and her daughter lived in Brooklyn, and she lived like 6 blocks from me. And I was like, oh shit.
Wow.
So I was able to hit her up, and I was like, listen, can we please use this for like a photo shoot? We just want to, rent it for a couple days. We ended up getting it like for the month for like next to nothing, which is insane because like the budget on this movie is minuscule. And having access to that specific place, because it becomes a third character of the movie essentially, or
Yeah.
I guess third and fourth, very much like the Overlook Hotel. But it should have like a presence, and everything about it should be intrusive to every other element of it. And we got super lucky with that. And we were able to take it over, and we slept the whole crew at the cabin right down the road. It was like a 5-minute walk through the woods. So we slept all the crew down at the first house, and I stayed up at the second house, and we just left it up as a live set. So we could literally just like leave lights, leave stuff on. It was our little haunted house up on the hill. And it was really fun, just to be like living and working in like a fully active horror movie set at all times. That was like halfway between use the whole time. And the woods around there were just like magnificent and very spooky. So yeah, that was Vermont. And the funny part is I got a call from Christian a couple like weeks after the shoot's on. He's like, you don't need to reshoot anything, right? I'm like, no, I mean, probably, but no, no interiors. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I'm looking at footage now. He's like, well, good, because the cabin burned down. It's no longer there.
Oh, wow.
Like,
Holy
what?
shit.
What do you mean burned down? It was gone. It literally, he just sent me a photo. It's just the chimney. It's completely wiped off the face of the earth. And
Holy
had
Oh,
like, yeah, I think it had its own like kind of malevolent vibes, and I think we pushed enough into it where I think it just like burst in flame at some point. We almost it's amazing that we weren't the ones to burn it down with all the film equipment, all the lights, and all that crap. And there were like vents on the floor, so the heat would just come straight out of the floor, and someone left a backpack on it, and like we caught it, the backpack was just melting into the floor because the heat was like, oh god. So like it's amazing that it wasn't us, but whoever went up there next took it out. So it's kind of like adds to the mystique of that place that, you know, it was, there were some nightmare moments shooting on that thing, and the fact that that place is now actually completely gone. I feel like the circle has been closed in some way. So yeah.
yeah, you touched on the budgetary stuff, which independent filmmaking, it's all about what you can do with what you got.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that the nightmare sequence, without getting into any spoilers, was super freaking dope. Like, where did the inspiration from that come from?
Oh yeah. So that's thank you for saying so, because that was such a, we had to kind of figure something out that we could do, because it needed to be it needed to have its own kind of like vibe. And I knew we weren't going to have budget to really do like really funky stuff. And I'm not so great with physical. I'm fine with physical effects and animation, but I'm no, you know, I'm no CGI guy.
Yeah.
So I took a bunch of mushrooms and went into one of those like float tanks, you know, those like floating salt tanks,
Yeah, yeah.
and just kind of like did some sketching after that. And then Alex Monroe, the cinematographer, we had been talking about a couple like, all right, what's the weirdest thing we could use to make these dream sequences like connect? Because it had to be like the sinews of the story kind of run through them, and it's like, you know, you need to be able to discover things from them. So they had to be not quite literal, but they had to still tell a story. It couldn't just be like weird looking. And we settled on this. It's called a FLIR camera, FLIR. It's
Hmm.
thermal imaging. They use it in
Okay.
like factories and stuff. So like you put it up in the corner of the factory, and like, oh, your generator is glowing like that. So they're really not meant for film or anything like that, which I didn't realize how limited we would be with it, because it takes almost like, it's like stuttering, shuddery kind of images and stuff. So we just like every time we had like 20 minutes, because the cool thing was is that you didn't have to dress anything with the, it's just seeing heat. So you can just be anywhere, like literally like right where you are, we can get cool stuff, like, you know, as long as you're pointed in the right direction and stuff like that. So it kind of like freed our hands to just be like, all right, well, let's just shoot some more stuff. Like, all right, well, it's 30 degrees out, let's take Nassdja out in the woods and make her walk around in among the trees, and like you know, press her hand against a tree trunk, and it leaves the heat signature there and stuff like that. But that was also so thematic with the hunter, the watcher, the military aspect of Luke's grandfather, about, you know, having an extra ability when he's in the woods that can, you know, he's able to see things that other people aren't, and things like that. So, and then it dovetails right into the security cameras, and Luke's what's it called, surveillance of Nassdja, and never being able to get away from him, and that kind of getting into her brain and into her dreams and stuff like that. So we thought that, you know, it was a nice budgetary trick, but also it looked pretty cool, and I hadn't really seen it in a feature or anything like that. And then it worked so well thematically with all the, you know, story we were trying to tell. So that's kind of where it came from. And I mean, I had so like the sketches, the things that I wanted to do, we maybe got like 8% of it, but you know what? That's an indie movie. Like, you get what you get with what
For
you can
sure.
get with,
For
and we really tried to, you know, use it in a you know, not use it too much, but use it in a way that you don't lose interest anytime you see it. So that was kind of, I'm glad it like worked for you.
No, yeah. I mean, it's like this slap in the face for, and I mean that as a compliment, because the tonality of the film is in one lane, and then that sequence in particular is so different, which makes when she comes out of that
Mhm.
even scarier, because it's like once that happens, stuff rapidly starts to really hit the fan.
Yeah.
Was there, you know, the other thing that I thought was wild was your guys's gore effects.
Oh yeah.
because that's one thing. I mean, man, I'm coming out of film school and shit. Like, independent filmmaking is so much fun because you're trying your best to deliver as close to what a multi-million dollar film would. But the thing that I think is kind of in the corner of the filmmaker when it comes to horror movies is the practical effects.
Yeah.
And we've done shit like putting just Aquafina bottles filled to the brim with blood, and I've had a guy directly under the camera just squirting that shit up to to get the splatter effect for whatever it takes type of a thing.
Absolutely.
How was it rigging up for that final scene? Because you have not only do you have like the straight stab to the chest, like you got like the throat slit stuff going on and everything. Like what was that day like?
Oh man, that was the craziest day by far, because we kept putting off our night stuff because the night shoots are like it's just so hard. There's so much you have to light. And we were in the actual woods for that. We had like the generator like dug around, dug in the ground so the sound wouldn't carry so much. And it was towards the very end of the shoot, and it was freaking cold out. Like it was like 30 degrees out, and it was going to be a long overnight. And the Becca did our prosthetics and stuff like that. We had so I'm kind of handy with a little bit of that. I like doing the blood and gore stuff myself as much as I can. So we rigged up kind of like a collar kind of thing, and then had tubes connected to it, and then we had like a pump that would be just off camera. But the crazy thing is like there's absolutely no way we had a second take. Once that blood was out, we were done. Like it's bloody now. Everything is bloody, and we just knew that it was going to be. I knew it was going to be intense, but not for the actors. Of course, it's insane for everyone involved. It's insane, but for me, I had to pretty much edit it as I'm seeing it, because I know that there's no way we can reset anything. So we
Right.
did so especially when the big finale, when he's on top of her and everything, it's literally just Christian is chasing Maddie around with the pump, just squeezing him like blood, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. All right, just like yanking Alex by the collar, like pull him down here, like get the frame on here. Okay, all right, Nassdja, say your line or reach your hand, and just pull the camera over to squeeze, squeeze, come on, and like just as frenetic as it possibly could be. All the shaking, all the moving around and stuff like that. We were like, we ran out of blood in that one moment. We ran out of every clean anything we had. And then it was just like, try and get inserts. But like that whole sequence there, we shot in like maybe like, 3-4 minutes, just because it was like, get it, and like roll again. All right, just do one more time, just to fall. And my brother gets up and he's just like shaking, like the blood is like freezing down his back. And I was just like shook. There's like a really good behind the scenes photo where she just like, I'm like, do you want to go again? She's just like staring at me, just like blood splatter, just like with a ski jacket over her, just like, fuck you, dude. So yeah, it was I mean, that was living right there. That was living, because if you don't get that, or if there's a plug hanging out, or if you didn't get the coverage, or like the insert looks, like you can see the makeup, it's like, I mean, as you said, indie makers in a lot of ways, I feel like we're making films for each other sometimes. Like, can I get away with this? To the other version of me who's watching this being like, nah, that was kind of bullshit. Like the smell test for bullshittery is like, I don't know, it can be a calling card for some, like, trying to go that extra mile to get
For
the
sure.
physical effect to be so good that it was done on the day in camera. And like, I mean, it goes back for my favorite movie is American Werewolf in London. Just the physical practical effects have the nightmares that have been implanted in my cortex from that movie all come to the fact that I can see like the skin like being pushed out by the animatronic thing in there. And I even remember watching it as a kid, kind of understanding that this was, physical props and things like that, and there was like a puppetry thing going on, but it still made it so scary because I know I could like smell it and touch it.
Sure.
And I think that blood effects are always going to be like fun, but like if you can get it, I mean, it really comes down to the audience when you're in the dark watching it with people, and you just got to listen, like close your eyes and listen. And if you hear that like, oh, oh, or like, ooh, like, oh, when you get a couple of those like peppered around the audience, screening after screening, you're like, okay, all right, it worked. Like it
Yeah.
worked. That was my job. Like it worked. So yeah, that was a fun one, man. And the I don't want to give it away, but the I don't know what would you call that without giving it away? The moment that the I don't know the trap is sprung, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should have had something ready for that. I'm sorry. I should
No, it's fine. It's fine.
have. That one was Maddie, my brother. He does a lot of stunt stuff, and we had saran wrap between two trees, and we just had him sprinting down a hill as hard as he could into it, and just like clotheslining himself. With the camera just at an angle where you couldn't see it quite, and then we just brushed it out a little bit in post. And that one, I love that one. I think I was talking to my producer the other day. We're working through another script, and I think I'm gonna have that as like that'll be my calling card death thing. If I get another crack at making another movie, I'm gonna have some version of that in every movie, because it's just like, I don't know, it gets me every time. It just comes out of nowhere in a way where you don't know what the hell just happened, even for a little while. Like a couple minutes go by and you're like, well, what the fuck was that still? And then the reveal comes and you're like, oh, of course. Like, I mean, it's not, particularly clever. It's just like you don't see it coming. So literally too. So I don't know. Yeah, that's my gore take.
I love asking this question to directors, especially, but why horror? What
Oh
made you? What made you a fan or want to make horror movies?
yeah. So it's so funny because I don't particularly love watching a ton of horror movies. It's not like I'm a military guy. I love war stuff, and to me, war is horror. So there's always like a connection there. But for a couple of practical reasons. Number one, um, it has a place to go. If you make a horror movie, it
Mm,
has a spot on the shelf for your movie to fit amongst others. And the ability to get funding, the ability to sell a movie, to get it into festivals, to do all those things, when you can play within that sandbox in an effective way, you have a launch pad, and that's, I mean, filmmakers, I mean, it's not that it's not, I mean, everyone knows, but it's not that it's like some altruistic thing all the time. It's like sometimes it's like, I know I need to get this green lit. I need to get these producers to see it. And if it's some like funky ass drama that you're deeply in love with and it doesn't quite have a star involved, it's like, this isn't gonna get, it's not gonna
yeah.
be. So there's definitely that part of it. But I also think, and I've also kind of learned this from doing it, is the horror movie community is the most goddamn fun place to be. Like there's like nerddom, there's like sci-fi, like there's the Comic-Con thing, and then but like the horror people, man, they fucking rule. Excuse my French. They're like, I mean, they are just, they want their whiskey neat, like and you owe them as a filmmaker to like give them certain things. Like you can't mess around. Like you're on the hook for a couple of things. It's not necessarily a jump scare. It's not necessarily like, some like mind-bending sequence, but it is like you gotta, at least some part of it's gotta stick to them in some way, shape, or form. And I think that horror movies, and I think one of the reasons I love movies so much is that like when I close my eyes and I'm trying to think of things, like I will like visions of horror movies, especially Alien, and even though that's sci-fi, but there's certain like little moments in those movies that have like, from the minute I saw them, they are still right there when I close my eyes. And I think if you can work on that palette in horror, you can connect with your audience in such a like just immediate way. And I love that because I mean, you're always you're in conversation with your audience when you're trying to make a movie like this. And especially when someone who goes to a horror festival and they comes and sits down and to check this movie out, it's a little bit of a reach because I wouldn't call it a horror movie. We call it a thriller, call it a something like that, psychological thriller, which is
Sure.
cool. Which is closer to like the Ari Aster side of things, where it's like, Hereditary and those like horror movies, absolutely. But there's like some other like daylight factor, or there's like, it's an allegory for X, Y, and Z, like the relationships or grieving and stuff like that. Where this one is kind of, I think, like the generational trauma as a way, exploring generational trauma and domestic abuse and psychological abuse through the lens of a horror movie is like the best way to get at those really just really painful topics that are just like brutally hard to even just talk about, because anytime you start talking about it, someone has a story, someone has their own experience, and that it's always painful. And sometimes, God, it's just, it can be so brutal. So if you can frame it in a, it's an escape movie, it's about, liberation. If it's about these things, it allows yourself the distance and the ability to root for the final girl or the bad guy, or like, I want to see how fucked up this can get or something like that, but
Mhm.
still face those topics down a little bit, including COVID too. And that was kind of like where I was. That's why I made such a run at this movie at that moment. Because right as the doors were opening up and things were starting to happen, I was like, I have to do this absolutely right now while it's some kind of fresh, because I don't know, the shelf life of the COVIDness of the movie, I don't think is all that important. But I think that we all went through this kind of like shared trauma, and being able to kind of like process that in a way that's like kind of fun and it has legs that go in other directions. um, it makes it, it makes the horror genre such a great weapon for vanquishing the trauma that you've experienced, or at least facing it.
I mean, you that was beautifully said because we are in charge of uh, panel production for a horror con up here,
Oh,
and so we have gotten, we've been doing it for like 10 years, and I mean,
cool.
I've been fortunate enough to meet, all the Jasons and all these, you name it, and we've probably interviewed them in that panel setting, and the people that come to that, getting to interact and talk with fans face to face, the horror community, like you said, is unlike any other film genre community. I would say the closest is probably Star Wars,
Yeah,
where where they are going to accept you as long as they can tell by watching what you do that you did it with the respect to the horror like the horror entity, I guess, for lack
the
of a better.
audience too, like the horror audience, like, because you can't get shit past these guys. Like,
Yeah.
they'll eat you alive. And the questions I got after screenings, it was never what I expected, and they were so much more like deep about like the connections to the ghost and like things like that, but like in ways that I hadn't thought about it, to the point where I'm like, shit, man, I need a minute with that question. Like, I know I wrote and directed this thing, but I haven't thought of it that way. Um,
Yeah. The thing, that is fun to see is when you put something out there, um and I know in the stuff that we've done, you're your own worst critic, and it's always one of those, like you're saying, going into screenings and getting, gauging that reaction. You always, you're waiting to see how it's received, and I'm always within the mind of, expect the worst, hope for the best,
mhm, mhm.
because you never know. I did stand up comedy for a number of years, and it was like you can go out on that stage
God.
and they're either going to shit all over you or they're going to love you, and maybe they're going to shit on you in the beginning until you get rolling, but then they're going to start to get it, type of a thing. And
And win them. Yeah.
horror fans, like, they love, you could put something, our thing that we're doing right now, we made the first version of it, or the first, episode, whatever you want to call it, and it's the super campy Ghostbusters meets The Office thing, but
Hmm.
being an independent, no budget thing, I was like, we're going to lean into the camp,
Yeah.
because what do if we're going to market it as like this super polished thing, it's not going to fly because we don't have the budget for it to be. And the second that we showed it, the horror community, they got it, and it was like, we understand what you're doing. And like you mentioned, a drama or an action, or even like a wartime thing, like, I feel like you definitely have to like fly within these certain parameters, where horror is so wide open and there's so many subgenres and there's so many different ways to tell your story that it really is an awesome genre to screw around with, man.
Oh, absolutely. And also like it's so much built on subverting. Like it is kind of a joke, not a joke, but like it's a joke every time, kind of, like it's I mean, every great horror movie is also a hidden comedy, I think, like so
Oh
many
yeah.
times. And that's why our movie does have like it doesn't have a ton of humor in it. And I was always trying to find some, and there is some to be mined there. But like when you talk about camp and stuff like that, that's like the shared language. It's almost like an offering to the community in some way to be like, look, we're like we know, we know, and I
Yeah.
know that we know. So like watch this shit and like let's go. And if you can get that buy-in, and that's why the like with the structure of this movie, you mentioned it earlier, like the first two acts are kind of like, what are we doing, like where is this going, like, and then I was like I'm just like, if I can get these people to still be bought in by the time we get to that first dream sequence, it'll be off to the races, because once that happens, then there's another little beat, and then all of a sudden that like fourth thing, it's just downhill, it's just all the way downhill, it's just
Mhm.
full tilt from a certain point on, it just goes. And it's carried by this, like the soundtrack is another horror movie thing that I think is like so important. um Having that soundtrack to really be like wild, and talk about being able to experiment with a soundtrack. So we made that with Elvin Shabazian and the Weathermen, my really dear friends. They are incredible musicians, and they just were able to throw some stuff into that soundtrack that was also like the samples, like we sampled a ton from that Jungle Book movie that's in there. So it has
Mm.
these like almost like pseudo derivative, like weirdo interpretations of an existing score, which to me feels that's like horror. It's a twisted ass version of like X, Y, and Z. And I think that like once you can get those two things running at the same time, and just the audience is just falling down that rabbit hole with you, that I think that's when it works best, when you like don't quite know what's coming next. And yeah, and the horror movie community, if you can have them either scratching their head or saying hell yeah at any point in your movie, you've done something, because those guys are there. Those guys and girls are smart. They watch a ton of movies. They consume so much. They always know that, oh, that's kind of like that, or like, oh, you use that shot from this, and they're always right. Like they can catch it so well. So as much as horror can be such a great uh, point to get in, I think, for like first time filmmakers and stuff like that, you're also playing with live ammo with those people, because like you said, like you got to win them, and if you don't, they're just going to be like, fuck this, I'm out, and they will tell you to your face too.
The film, like I had mentioned, is on Tubi right now. But where can everybody kind of like keep track of you, man? When
Oh
check
yeah.
out what you got going on next.
Oh, so I have my Instagram, which is mostly just pictures and videos of my 3-year-old reacting to Nightmare Before Christmas, which has been on loop in the house for at least a month now.
It's not a
Um,
bad way to be.
yeah, I'll be posting on the Alone Together Instagram handle with like upcoming things and stuff like that. And then yeah, we have my producer Eric writes. He and I, we've got another project that we're like just starting to get moving with. A black comedy horror, like the darkest of dark humor horror movie, which he's going to write. He's a far better writer than I could ever try to be, even as a co-writer to Alex Vernonbach, who is a damn good writer. So that next project, I think I can't wait to tell you about. It's going to be like a wacky, bloody romp kind of thing, and it'll be like a little bit more of a party than this one, which is a little bit more of like some strong whiskey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great analogy. Yeah. Well, Will, man, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. And we will link the Alone Together stuff in the show notes. And if you haven't come across it yet, you should after watching or listening to this interview, because it is a damn fine horror film. And again, congratulations, buddy.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. I truly appreciate your time, and yeah, we'll talk very soon. I appreciate it.
Right on.